So just dance, dance, dance. So just dance, dance, dance. Ooh, it's something magical. It's in the air, it's in my blood, it's rushing on. I don't need no reason, don't need control. I fly so high, no ceiling when I'm in my zone. Cause I got that sunshine in my pocket, got that good soul in my feet. I feel that hot blood in my body when it drops. Ooh, I can't take my eyes off it, moving so phenomenally. More like the way we rock it, so don't stop, stop, stop. Under the lights when everything goes, nowhere to hide when I'm getting you close. When we move where you already know, so just imagine. Nothing I can see but you when you dance, dance, dance. Feel the good, good creeping up on you, so just dance, dance, dance. Come on, all those things I shouldn't do, but you dance, dance, dance. And ain't nobody leaving soon, so keep dancing. I can't stop the feeling, so just dance, dance, dance. So just dance, dance, dance. So just dance.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for hopping on. And those of you who have your cameras on, thank you so much. It is way easier to have a class to faces rather than it is just a bunch of little screens of names. So thank you, thank you. I would love to just give a warm welcome and thank you to Jose Medina and Rich Cosgrove for doing this for us today. They are two of my mentors and know the industry better than anybody I know. So without further ado, Jose, I will kick it off to you.
Awesome. Can everyone see? Can I get a thumbs up if you guys can see this? See my screen? Good? Cool. All right. So I was challenged, Rich and I were challenged to talk about the stats in the market and what's going on with the market and not put anyone to sleep. So we're going to do our best to make this educational and entertaining. So for those that don't know me, my name is Jose Medina. I am a 20+ year real estate agent. I've had a real estate team for the last 19 years and run 3 market centers in Northeastern Ohio with 750 agents, and then do a couple other things. So that's me. And I'm still actively in listings. I had 2 listing appointments yesterday, and I have 2 listing appointments today. So I'm not just like out there doing leadership things. I'm in the trenches with every one of you guys. Rich, you want to talk about yourself?
Yeah, so I have also been doing this for just about, I think it'll be 21 years in December. I am the broker here at Legacy Group Realty and at Keller Williams, and also the GM for the 3 market centers that Jose is the OP of. I've been in that role now about 1.5 years, and I also still sell, not a ton, but enough to keep my interest in buyers and sellers as far as what's going on in the market and educating myself so that I can help coach and educate others.
Cool. So a little disclaimer. So this is not a Keller Williams presentation. This isn't really anything to do with Keller Williams. This is just information about Northeastern Ohio, what's going on in the market, what are we seeing out there, what are the stats telling us, and just that's really what it's about, giving back to the community. All right, so the information that we're going to be going over today, you know, most of it's coming from the MLS. There's a couple of sources that I pulled from a national level, but all the numbers that we're going to be looking at, it's all about residential, right? So this isn't getting into land. This isn't getting into commercial. It's just residential, single family, condos. That's the stats that we're talking about. We will also make these slides available for people. I'll get a copy to the man, the myth, the legend, Mike Schmieder, and he can get them out to anybody that's attending if you guys want them. So just this is residential, single family, Northeastern Ohio, condos, single families. Cool. Cool. So again, the goal is we want to help educate the realtor community so we can have more educated realtors serving and helping our clients. I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there about the market, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of I don't know, people are just scared, really, I think. And so our goal is to be able to just educate you so you can educate the consumer and everyone can have a better experience. So this is a term that I have came across several times, and I think it's probably the most accurate term to kind of understand and fully kind of wrap our heads around what has happened over the last few years, right? And so I think what we as humans, we often go back to like our last previous experience and, you know, hey, this is what it was like 6 months ago. This is what it was like last year. And looking back on these wonderful years that we were blessed with in real estate, which is Q2 2020 to Q2 2022. And Keeping Current Matters is something that I subscribe to, and they basically call this the unicorn years, right? And these are the honeymoon years. These are the great years for the housing market. And we're not in those anymore, right? And we're transitioning out of that, and we have transitioned out of that. And so I think when we look at a lot of these numbers, we have to kind of have this mindset and this thought pattern around, yeah, 2020, 21, 22, like that 24 months-ish, those are unicorn years. And we really almost need to like subtract that from your mind when we think about things. So if you've ever seen that movie, Men in Black, they have this device, right? They have this device that they give people, they show people that erases their memory in like the last whatever 5 minutes or so of whatever happened. That's really kind of what we really need to do about the last 2 years, is we like need to erase our memory of what had happened over that period of time.
Now, if you just had the power to erase that from the consumer's mind, that would be easier for us to explain, but yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so you're gonna see a lot of numbers, and I'm gonna try to do my best to break it down so it's just not like overwhelming numbers. So what this is the number of closed transactions per month broken down by year, right? And so when we look at this, hopefully you can see my little pointer thing. So in May 2023, the month previous, we had 3,000 transactions close, right? And I think anytime you look at numbers, you can't look at May versus March. You can't look at May versus January. What you have to look at is, what did this May compare to versus the previous Mays, right? So if you run your numbers across here, you can see how this May was in comparison to the other Mays. And I think we have to go back to 2013, 2014, 2015 before we can see a May like what we just experienced, right? And I think that's pretty much the same case for April, right? And so when we talk about unicorn years, obviously we're taking 20, 21, 22 out of that equation. I think we actually have to go back to see the activity levels. You have to actually go back about 10 years to actually get a number that's about where we're at. So when we look at the number of cells and the available cells out there, it's important to realize like, oh, it's even before the unicorn years, it was in the 2013 range is kind of the number of transactions that we're seeing. Make sense?
Sam, I think you asked a question, are these sales in Ohio? And I believe that is accurate. Use the MLS data from Ohio only.
Yes, it's Northeastern Ohio MLS stats, residential only. Okay. So again, these slides will be available for you guys. Hopefully you'll be able to incorporate them into listing presentation, buyer presentations. That's our hope. That's our goal, is for you to be able to use these. And if there's any comments, questions, feel free to throw that in the chat box. Anything to add to that, Rich?
No, nope.
So this is a phenomenon that I started talking to my team about last November. because we started to see this kind of happen. And this is terminology that I hope that you guys can use in your conversations with buyers and sellers. And it's this concept called mortgage rate lockdown. Okay. So what that is three things have to happen for this phenomenon of mortgage rate lockdown to actually happen. So the first one is you have to have record low mortgage rates. Check, right? So what that means is right now, about 64.5% of the population that have mortgages are sitting on a mortgage between 2 to 4%. If you spread that out to 2 to 5% interest rate, there's about 86% of the people that have a mortgage have a rate between 2 and 5%, right? So this is coming out of those years that we just got out of, correct? So that's the first thing. Second thing is mortgage rates need to rise in excess of 2%. Check. We all know that that's happened, right? Doubled last year. The third thing is that prices still will continue to go up, or I would also say like stay stagnant, right? They're not coming down. And so anytime you have that, which is very rare for these three things to happen, anytime you have that, you're going to have what's called a mortgage rate lockdown, which is what we've all experienced, where we talk to sellers and they're saying, I'm not moving because of math, right? Because of math. I'm not going to sell my $300,000 house to buy a $200,000 house and have a higher payment, right? It doesn't make sense. And so the thing that's going through that seller's mind is it's not about the price of the house. It's not even really about the interest rate. It's about the total cost of housing. And when you have these three factors kind of hitting at one time, it's about the total cost of housing actually going up for someone, right? And it just doesn't make sense for me to make that move because of these three factors going on.
I think the interesting thing to note too is, I mean, I know, Jose, you and I, being licensed in the early 2000s, when we got licensed, interest rates were around 7%. So where they're at now, saying 20 some years later, really not so bad that they're still at that 7% or that they went down. It's certainly not like the 80s before we were ever in real estate where they were, what, 13 to 17%. So 7% is not the end of the world. So anybody that hasn't been in the business, a 7% interest rate for a mortgage does not stop people from buying on a typical basis. It's really just because we are so used to those low interest rates right now. As Jose said, the total cost of ownership is higher when you calculate that higher interest rate. We're just used to the low interest rates right now. So we're just in a shift.
Yeah, and I think also, like, when you look at these three factors, if there's any one of those factors that are not on that page, we don't have the same issue, right? Like, so if record low mortgage rates and then rates go up by 2%, but prices come down, that's okay, right? Like that we wouldn't be in this situation. Or record low mortgage rates and then prices are going up. Well, that was just the market that we were in. Still, again, not a mortgage rate lockdown. It's these three, like this trifecta of things happening that has put us kind of in this weird mortgage rate lockdown. So my hope is that you can use this terminology when you're talking to buyers, sellers, and helping them understand what's actually going on in the market and what, why are we seeing this? Cool. Here's another page with a lot of numbers on it. So this is the total number of active listings, again, in Northeastern Ohio, residential, single family, and condos. So again, look at the numbers for May and what that looks like. 3,770 active listings are what it looked like in May. Just scroll back and see the dramatic difference of what that looks like over those years. Right. And so we're going to go into a little bit later about what's a balanced market and what that looks like. I'll tip my hand a little bit. These numbers here is what a balanced inventory looks like given the pace that we have. Right. And so when you look at, well, how long is this going to last? Are we almost out of it? Is there more inventory coming? I'm not that good at math, but that's a lot more houses to actually hit the market for us to actually get back to a normal supply of houses on the market, right? So we got a way to go with that.
And I think that's important to point out because there are some agents out there saying, oh, it's going to be doom and gloom, we're going into a recession or what have you. And you can clearly see by the numbers, we are far away from a real estate recession, considering that we have not even a quarter of the amount of homes and inventory that we had back in 2013 and 14 when you had a balanced market. So anybody that is out there saying that there is any real estate agent, especially that's saying that there is a recession of housing coming, I think that these numbers can tell you a lot different story.
Yeah. Real quick, Mike, someone texted me. Are we recording this, Mike?
Yes, it is.
I think we're out of spots for people to come in and people are in waiting rooms. Okay. Yeah, so we want to be an educated realtor. We want to educate the consumers and hopefully educate other realtors that don't know the actual numbers behind this. So let's talk about this concept of months of inventory. This may seem a little bit elementary for some of you, but I do want to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're understanding this concept of months of inventory. So when we look at this, and this is something that I recommend you do on your listing appointments, because I think it's really helpful for your client to see the months of inventory. And for me, it's a point of differentiation when I talk to a client, because every agent's saying the same thing. And I think if you can go in and show them the months of inventory, not just say, oh, yes, it's a seller's market, but actually show them the numbers. It's a way for you to differentiate yourself from the competition, right? And so months of inventory, what we're going to talk about here is a general term for the whole market is what we're going to talk about. When I go into a listing appointment, I recommend doing it for the area that you're in, right? And so if I'm on a listing appointment in Jackson Township between 400,000 and 500,000, I'm pulling the information to give me the months of inventory for Jackson Township 400 to 500, because it's very specific, and that price point is going to be different than if I did that for Jackson Township between 200,000 and 300,000, right? And so just being able to break it down for the local market and give them that information, I think is very, very valuable.
Jose, as we're still on inventory, before we get too much further, there was a question. So are the inventory numbers inflated in 2013 a result of the housing bubble burst from 2008 to 2010?
It's a great question. I'm going to put a pin in that until we get to another slide.
Perfect.
Okay. So months of inventory. So this is how you figure out months of inventory if you don't know how to do this. And again, some of this is you guys are advanced, so you know this, but I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. You take the number of homes for sale, and then you divide that by the number of homes that sell per month. Okay. And then you get, that brings you to how many months of inventory. So for example, I have 100 homes for sale. Say it's Jackson Township, 400,000 to 500,000. This isn't accurate, but 100 homes for sale, 20 homes are selling per month. That equals 5 months of inventory. Okay. There's 3 terms out there. There's a buyer's market, a seller's market, and a balanced market. Everyone knows that. There's some debate about what is a balanced market. I've heard 6 months. I've heard 4 to 5 months. I think for the interest of this conversation, I would say somewhere between 4 to 5 months is probably a balanced market. And so let's look at what that looks like for our market and where we're at. So right now, for the entire market, we're at 1.26 supply of inventory, months of inventory. So again, if we look at that from a May standpoint, you can see we actually need to go back to 2014, 2015, somewhere in there before we would actually have like what someone would consider a balanced market, right? So if you have been licensed like after 2014, all you have ever experienced was a seller's market. That's it. You've never experienced a buyer's market. Now, what you have experienced in the last couple of years is a very intense seller's market, right? It's not as intense as what it was over here, but this still technically was a seller's market, right? And so when we look at when was the last balanced market, it was probably 2014, 2015, depending on how you want to count it, was when you were actually seeing a balanced market.
Because right before that, it was actually turned into a buyer's market. Your home sat on the market for quite a long time. If you look at May of 2013, you were at 7 months of inventory. And that's where you could go in and you could ask for pretty much anything the buyer wanted, whether they wanted closing cost coverage, whether they wanted a rate buy down, whether they wanted a home warranty or a lot of repairs. You were able to negotiate that, and a seller was willing to do it simply because they wanted to sell their home. We don't see that today.
Yeah. So it's a very intense seller's market, and it's been a seller's market for a while. I can't express how important, I know I hit on it once, I'm going to hit on it again. I can't express how important it is to have this information for a seller when you're sitting down and talking to them. And it's even more important to have this information to educate them based on their specific price point and their specific school district. If nothing else, it separates you from the 3 other people that they talked to prior, right? It makes you look like you know more, like you're the professional, etc. So my recommendation is to have this information, be familiar with it, be able to educate, and that and alone will educate you from the competition. Okay, so this is the chart that kind of blows my mind. If you can't tell, I'm kind of like a numbers nerd. If I'm getting excited about a chart that looks like this. So this is the number of new listings. Again, a bunch of information on here, and this just blows my mind. So look at this in this regard. So start with May of 2023. We'll talk about April and May of 2023. In those months, there was 3,200 houses on the market that were newly listed, right? These are houses that just hit the market. In May, it was just under 3,700. So think about this. There was more people willing to put their house on the market in April of 2020. More people willing to put their house on the market April of 2020 in a worldwide pandemic, when people said, don't let people in your house, don't get close to them. There was more people willing to put their house on the market then than there was in April of May of this year. Does that blow anybody else's mind, or am I the only one that like geeks out about this stuff? Like that's insane. Like that's unheard of, that there would be more people willing to put their house on the market in a worldwide pandemic than there was the last 60 days. And so when you're out there and you're like, yeah, there's no houses on the market, there's nothing new hitting the market, it's not an exaggeration of anything. I can't see people's faces, so I have no clue if people are as blown away by this as me, or if it's just me nerding out. Either way, I'm having fun. I don't know if you guys are. So this is like very mind-blowing, and I think that this is good for you and a buyer council to be able to like explain, set proper expectations, and like just educate the person that you're working with. If you're running a team, your team should know this, right? And so this is just, I think, very helpful information for people if you're in the real estate community.
Jose, you geeked out so much that everybody left. There are no faces looking back at us anymore. Right? It's just us.
Yeah. Any other comments, Rich?
No, I think the only, well, yes, I think the only thing I could say to add to that is when Jose is mentioning that you should educate yourself on this, it's not one particular slide individual. You need to understand the history of it and educating the seller, not just to say it's a seller's market, because we'll get into pricing here in a little bit, but you can't go back to what the prices were just even a few months ago. Prices are changing, things are changing, inventory is changing. So make sure you have the full picture. A lot of these slides, like you said, will be available and just make sure you're educating yourself to fully understand that you can't just say it's a seller's market. You have to know what that means.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Seller's market and how intense it is and what it actually looks like, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So this is from Gary's vision speech, and this is one of the Gary Keller's vision speech from Family Reunion, and this is one of the big reasons why there's a shortage of houses on the market. And so I don't know if you're like me, when you run into people, like the first thing they ask about is how's real estate, which I appreciate. And like, I do other things outside of real estate, but everyone wants to talk about real estate. And so one of the questions I get is like, why is there such a shortage of houses on the market? This is one of the big components of that. Is if you look at from 2008 to really 2019, there was a shortage of houses that were being built. So whatever that line is right there, that's what the economists say, that's how many new houses that we need built every year. And so we went through a 10+ year period of underbuilding, right? And people were still having babies, people were still graduating from college, people were still looking for bigger houses. And so in that period, there was just a shortage of new houses entering the market. And that is now catching up to us. And so just understanding that's a big part of it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about new homes, I think, a little bit later. But when you get that question of why is there such few shortage of houses, this is one of the major components of that.
So there was a question in the chat, why was there such a shortage of building during those periods?
Fear. Like, so builders in this range, like built and built and built. And then in this range, I mean, it was, I think Caitlin Shepard's on here, like her dad's a builder, but like it was last man standing. Like if there was 50 builders in our community, it went down to probably 5 to 7 builders, right? Like there was only a few builders that were left because prices were going like this and construction costs were going like flat. And so it was really, really hard to make a profit. And so if I'm a builder, I would rather not build anything than lose money because of the housing market crash, right? And I would really have to be pretty bold to go and put up a spec when no one's buying houses, when there's 9 to 10 months of inventory on the market. Why would I need to go build another house? Like it was just a lot of fear, I think, in these years. And then it just took time for people to get back in business, people to get funding to go build houses, all of those things.
And remember, most of the national builders build with their own money. So that means you don't need a construction loan. So when they're putting up these houses, they have all the labor costs, all of the material costs, all of the sitting costs basically on these properties. So the spec homes weren't going up like they were in 2005 through 7, simply because they couldn't afford to put that much money out when people weren't buying them. Whereas your specialized builders, that was a little bit different story. We still lost some of those, but they only build with construction loans, meaning that they're getting the money as they're building. So that's also the reason. So when Jose says fear, it was fear from the builders to say, hey, I can't put that much money out because I don't have it coming back in.
Well, and it was the lack of demand too. Like, if I go out right now and I have a house that, let's say I'm in the $500,000 to $600,000 range, I go out and I look, and there's 5 houses for me to look at, and I don't like any of them, then I'm going to go build. Well, back then, there was 35 houses for you to pick from, right? So you probably could find it, and you could probably buy that for way less expensive than what you could build for.
And you had a finished basement or a deck or a patio or whatever, where you weren't getting that with the new build for the price.
Yeah, and the seller would drop the price $30,000 to accommodate too.
Right.
Yeah, it's so funny. I looked at when I built my house. I built my house in 2010. I'm one of these kind of crazy people, but I built my house then, so that's funny. All right, so this is, I was talking to an agent yesterday, and her business was down quite a bit, and we were just kind of talking through that. And this is what I think a lot of agents are feeling. So this is, again, from our vision speech by Gary Keller. And this talks about what's the average size per agent, right? And so in the last, 9 years, we have seen that the size per agent has went down to 6.3, which is, I don't know, I can't tell for sure, but it looks like that's an all-time low. And that's two factors, right? That's more agents than ever. And in 2022, the drop in transactions went down. The interesting part about that is it's not the lowest that we've seen as far as volume per agent because of the prices, right? And so everyone's like, well, when are agents going to start getting out of the business? They can do 6 sides now, and it may feel like 9 sides, right? Because values have went up so much. And so they're not feeling the pain yet of getting out of the business because the volume is there, even though the transactions are at the all-time low.
There are agents getting out of business. I mean, NAR stats went out. We're losing about 1% membership per month since January. So it is going down, but it's not a mass exodus like you might think, or you are asking that question, when are agents going to get out of the business? As Jose said, most agents have not quite felt it yet. The ones that have gone out of the business are the ones that really aren't doing any business, because we know that, for those part-time agents, it's a real struggle. If you can't get people in the house, you're not writing on the house. If you can't work hours that the consumer wants, you're not getting them in. And also, because it's a seller's market, if you're not listing homes and you're exclusively a buyer's agent, if you don't have those leads coming in and a great way to capture them, you're also not getting the business.
Yep. Yeah. So Rich, you said it's coming down about 1%. Is that gross, or is that net? There's
net
there every month. There's still people getting in the business, but you're saying the membership is dropping by 1%.
Right. Even with the introduction of new agents, the membership is dropping on average about 1% net per month since January.
Okay.
And I imagine we'll continue to see that drop for a while.
Yeah, I would. Not an economist, graduated high school with a 2.6. So do take this for what it's worth. I would imagine that you would actually see that rate increase the second half of the year, is my guess, because you had the spring market and we're already starting to see some seasonability changes. And I would imagine that second half of the year might actually increase a little bit. Who knows? I think I lost a lot of people's respect when I said I graduated high school with a 2.6. So
there was a question in the chat: is there a way to find out what local boards are experiencing? And I would just say, from my understanding, local boards actually have not felt that decline yet here in Ohio. We are, it filters in from the coast, each side kind of comes in, and then eventually we feel that. But right now, actually, if you look, some of the boards are growing in size because there are agents still getting in the business. But they will start to see that fizzle out because of the board dues, that are coming up, our MLS dues, all that fun stuff. We usually see it, especially towards the end of the year, agents getting out of the business. And with this being so competitive, it's going to continue to happen. Agents are going to continue to exit.
Yeah, we have to remember Ohio is lagged from the coast and from Florida and all of that. And so when we see it's dropping, we're actually seeing it mostly drop in those areas, and it hasn't hit us yet. So, okay, so this is from Keeping Current Matters. This I have found, I would say I lived this and experienced this, and then I saw this and I was like, oh, that is 100% accurate. So this is buyer demand and as it fluctuates based on rates. And so here's what I mean by that. When I see rates go close to 7, it feels like to me someone has turned off my showing notifications on my listings. Someone has turned off the buyer phone where all the buyer calls come in, because this happens, right? Buyer demand gets very weak. And when it drops closer to 6, or if it'd be amazing if it dropped under 6, we start to see multiple offers get more intense, buyer demand goes. And so you know, we can all sit here and say, oh, 6.5, 7, that's not really that high. And the buyers out there pay attention to that, and we see that happen, and we see the buyer traffic go up and down based on what rates are doing. So for me, if I was you, I would probably put this into a listing presentation to talk to clients about how important interest rates are and how we need to be monitoring that with price and buyer demand and all of those things. This is a slide from earlier this year when I did a presentation for a group of investors that I work with, and share a real quick story. I had a property that went under contract, and it went under contract right here. And this was like right around the first of the year, and rates were over 6.5. Had under contract, it went for like at list price, and we had like 2 offers. The same house. So then we were a week before closing, and the deal fell through. And we went back on the market, and we hit the market right in this range. That same house that had like 2 or 3 offers went back on the market. We had like, it was over 10 offers, and it went for 30,000 over list price. All because of what happened between here and here, and how buyers were feeling about things. Their affordability was higher, all of those things. So making sure we understand before we recommend a price adjustment on a property, is it because we're right here, or is it because we're truly overpriced, right? And so just understanding that and being able to explain that to our sellers, I feel like is a critical aspect of our fiduciary duty to our clients.
Right. So that's an excellent point. You don't want to just drop the price of a house because it's been on the market for a week. Just because we're used to homes selling in under a week or even under a couple of days, that is not the normal in a balanced market. So market time will typically get longer as we stabilize in the market. So again, don't just jump to, oh, we're overpriced. No, it could just be that there are less buyers out there, and it's going to take a little bit longer to sell the property.
So what's next? So I was actually at a listing appointment last night. It's a weird listing appointment. And the guy was like, well, there's a recession coming, right? So that means everything's going to slow down, and the housing market's, you know, going to correct itself. And that's completely inaccurate. And so this is again from Keeping Current Matters, but this is a recession. A lot of people think recession means prices of houses are going to fall. This is the last 6 recessions and how that actually was, how that played out with home values. You see 2 out of the last 6 recessions, home prices fell. One in the 90s was very minimal. And then 2008, we all know what that happened if you lived through that or have heard about that. So I think it's important when we educate people that a recession does not mean falling prices, and a recession doesn't mean rates are coming down, right? And so here's, again, the last 6 recessions, and here's what interest rates did during that. So being able to understand, comprehend, educate our clients, I think is really critical that, yeah, we might be heading into a recession, who knows? And if that happens, that doesn't mean that prices are coming down or rates are coming down necessarily. Cool. So what's next? Again, part of how we work our way out of this inventory issue is building houses, right? Like we need to build more houses. We need for people to be interested in building houses to help with the alleviation. So this is a very confusing graph. I always get confused by these graphs with the 3 different colors. But if you pay attention to 2023, that's the darker blue. So you can see in April of 2023, we built more houses than April of 2022 and less than April of 2021. So you can kind of see like, okay, in April, we started more houses, we had more new home sales. And that's still like the previous couple months, we weren't as strong as what we were in the last years in those months. And so I think this is something to keep track of. I think for us to think we're going to build our way out of it, I don't know if that's 100% doable. A lot of builders that I'm talking to, it's just still the cost of building. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for people. So just something to keep an eye on is that new home sales. That's one lever for us to be able to get out of this shortage of inventory.
It's been a few months since I heard Lawrence Yun speak, but I think he said it would take 17 years of building at the rate we're building right now if we were to build our way out of this recession. If that was the key, it would still take 17 years to get there.
Wow. That's thoroughly depressing. Thanks,
Yeah.
Rich.
Well, you can always count on me to keep it real.
The other question I get a lot is, well, like, you know, is there going to be more foreclosures? Is there going to be more like shadow inventory or distressed sales coming on the market? And so the historical average is 6% of homes that are underwater. And it's real simple why homes aren't underwater, because values have went up so much. And so like, we're not anywhere close to having upside down sellers that have to do a short sell or have to sell, like it's just not happening. And I think there's a lot of doomsayers out there that are like, oh, this is all going to plunge and there's going to be a bunch of people that have to sell. I don't see those numbers anywhere, and I've tried to look for them. I just don't see anywhere where that's going to necessarily happen. This is the amount of distress sales over the last couple of years. You can see basically next to nothing when you look at 2018 to 2022, like literally not much going on there. This is maybe some positive news. If you've been licensed for longer than 2020, you know that at some point there was a slower season and a busier season in real estate. And depending on what that looked like, you would have a spring market that was very robust. And then the summer market was busy, but not as robust. And then the winter months, like it was actually like a little bit of a slower time. And I think what's happened over 2020, 21, 22 is like seasonality has just went out the window, right? Like it just went out the window. It didn't matter if it was November 1st or March 1st, there was multiple offers and things were going crazy. So my hope in reading this is there might be a return to seasonality, because if you look at some of these numbers, so when I look at these numbers and everything's 100%, like there's no seasonality there. This is the original list price versus final sell price. So there's no seasonality. It's red hot the whole time. In a normal market, you may see 3, 4, 5% difference in these numbers, winter years versus summer years, or busy time versus not as busy time. This was the first year that we really kind of saw that, right? And so January things somehow they were selling at 96% of the original list price, which we haven't seen that really since pre-pandemic, right? And so I don't know if I'm just being optimistic or wishing for the best or what, but my hope is that I'm starting to see some seasonality, that we're going to get back to, yes, it's still a seller's market, but not as intense. And there is a little bit of reprieve for buyers. I think that's important to note. If you're consulting with a buyer that's getting burned out of bidding on houses, this may be what they need to see is like, yes, we just got out of the spring market. It was intense, and that's normal. And it's not as intense moving forward, hopefully, right? So just being able to consult with them. Cool. Speaking of Lawrence Yun, he said inventory will remain tight in the next couple months and even the next couple of years. Some homeowners are unwilling to trade up or trade down after locking in historically low mortgage rates. Here's what I would say about that. I agree 100%. I don't think it's the inventory issue is not going away. And what I would say is, instead of complaining about the rain, we just need to learn how to dance in the rain better, right? Instead of complaining about it, let's figure out how we win and how we excel when it's raining, because it's not changing. All the wishing, all the hoping of more inventory, it's not going to change it. So we just need to get better and sharpen our skills.
The good news is with real estate, there's always a reason to sell. There's always a reason to sell. It's job security. And I think we'll get there in a few slides, but
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect way to say it. Dance in the rain, because there are going to be days where it's sunny. There are going to be days where it's raining, but right now there's no reason for doom and gloom.
So this is, if this matters at all, this is mortgage rate projections. So these are 3 institutions guessing what mortgage rates are going to be at in the next couple, I guess within the next year, I guess. I like that this graph shows the average of all 3, because I think some could be optimistic and so forth. But when buyers are asking what are rates going to be doing, none of us know. And this is what people that are smarter than me are saying what they could be. I also don't know if I would go around and like advertise that, because if it's close to 7 now and I'm like, oh, if I wait a little bit, it's going to be 6.1, that's just going to delay your buyer from actually having activity. So use that for what you want. Might be just a personal thing that you kind of understand what's going on there.
Yeah, as the lenders would say, date the rate, but marry the house. So that'd be a perfect time. Buy it now. You can always refinance later.
I'm not sure why I have that on there twice. Besides, I did it last night and I was getting tired. Oh, I know why I put it on there. As we look at these numbers, that correlates with this, right? And so you may see more buyer demand as rates eventually go down. I'm not sure if I put a lot of weight into this, because I'm not sure how accurate these have been, and no one can predict what's going to happen in the future. So
Yeah, this is a guess. I mean, based on the fact that, I mean, with war, I mean, anything that happens in the economy, this is the best guess if nothing changes. But obviously, as the economy changes with elections and different things, anything can happen here.
Right. Yep. Cool. So I wanted to leave you guys with a couple more positive things. I was going over this last night with my wife, and she was like, "This seems kind of depressing." And I don't think it is, but I also wanted to leave you with some things that I'm telling our teams that we partner with, that I'm telling people that I get to work with closely. Here's how to win, and here's the message that we should be relaying to our clients. So this is from Gallup. This is America's opinion of the best long-term investments out there. And regardless of all this craziness going on, real estate still beats gold, still beats savings, CDs, bonds, cryptocurrency, whatever the case is. For 11 years, the vast majority of Americans are still believing that real estate is the best long-term investment for themselves. Right. And so, yes, we can get worried about how many realtors there are, how many sales, how many inventory. And it's not only where people shelter at, it's also the best long-term investment out there for people. And so I think if we can keep that in the forefront of our minds, keep that in the forefront of our clients that we're working with. Yes, it's frustrating for buyers out there. Yes, you might get beat out, and it's worth it because it is a good long-term investment.
I think the statistic is the average American home will go up in value 4% per year over the lifetime that you own the home. So I think to Jose's point is, yes, we may see prices dip now and again. We even saw them plummet back in 2008. But if you intend to own your home for the long term, you're going to make money on that investment, and it's the best return on your investment.
Well, not only that, but then you also lock in what your payment is, right? Like if I lock in today, regardless of what rents do 10 years from now, none of us think rents are going to be less 10 years from now. But what I can do as a homeowner is lock in the payment that I have and lock in that cost of my living there, minus taxes and insurance moving a little bit, right? Like that's going to be locked in for the long term. So, I don't know why that, oh, there it is. Okay, so the 6 Ds of a housing slowdown, this is one thing, I don't know if many of you have heard me talk about this, but regardless of this inventory shortage, these are the 6 Ds that as a realtor, I feel like people should be focusing on, because these are the reasons why people move. Divorce, unfortunately, right? That could be 3 transactions, technically, depending on how that plays out. But those people are going to be the people that are moving, right? That's not an emotional thing that they, oh, I don't want to move because my rate's too good. No, these people are moving. And so that is an opportunity. Diamonds, people getting engaged all the time, right? And even though the market is what it is, it's still better than renting, right? And so those newlyweds are getting, gonna be wanting a house, right? And so there's that.
And that's potentially three sales right there. If they each have a house and then they want to buy one together. So
right. Yeah. Diapers, right? People having babies. House is too big. Yes, the mortgage. I don't want to give up my 4%, but I also have 4 kids and I live in a 3-bedroom house, right? So there are those that are going to be moving because they have to move because they are, they're out of space, right? Distress. There are still people out there that they can't make their payments. They're going to lose their job, whatever the situation is. Those are people that are out there that are going to have to move. Deployment, I would also say like relocation. They're moving, right? They have to move. And then the last one is unfortunately death, but those are, again, motivated sellers. They're going to be selling. So when you're out there looking for future business, like I like to think of these as those are like your motivated sellers. Those are people that are definitely going to be doing something in this market. I think over the last couple of years, people have moved for opportunity and they've taken advantage of the market and cashed in on the rates and all of those things. And I think moving forward, these elements of why someone would move are going to drive the vast majority of the sales. So is your marketing plan, is your touch system around, getting into contact with those type of people? And the last thing I would say is, someone very early on in my business is actually Darcy Frill's dad. He told me very early on, he's like, the more contacts you have, the more contracts. The more contacts you have, the more contracts. So I started very early on building out my database. And it has been, out of the 800 transactions we do, over 600 of those come from our database. And so the one thing that you can control is you working your database and continuing to add people in. This was a study done by KW, and they said anybody that has, I forget the exact numbers, but anybody that has over 200 contacts in their, Joe, you might be able to help me with this, or Mike, you might be able to help me with this, but like the more contacts you have in your database, the more you're going to earn, basically. And so as you can see, they graphed out like who has the most. Those people with over 5,000 people in their database are making on average $352,000. So regardless of where you're at, you may be, I don't have anybody in my database, or I have a bunch of people, but the database is the thing that you can control. And focusing in on that, I think, is really, really critical. Jill, did I butcher that? And Mike, did I butcher that?
No, I was just actually typing in the chat. I think you said it really well. And you can see from the chart here, 201 is that number that you can essentially guarantee if you have over 201 contacts in your database that you're following up with and nurturing as you should, you will be over 100,000 in GCI. And it shows here like at 201, around that point to 300, I think the average GCI was 130,000. So the more people you have in the database, the more money you're making.
I think it's also important too, the more, obviously you want the more people in your database, but what are you doing with your database? Constantly have to nurture it, constantly have to pour into it. Other than that, they're just names and phone numbers, unless you do something with them.
Absolutely. You said it much better than I did. Cool. Okay, so that's my last slide. That's all I got. I would also say we're open for questions if people want to put them in the chat box, or if you're brave and want to unmute and share a comment, question, tell us how amazing we were, whatever it was.
Yeah,
This-
Jose, I've got a question.
Yeah.
This is Scott Kelly. I know there's also a difference in the market when you get above, it seems like 300,000. Can you talk, because some of those sellers are wondering why their property's not moving as fast and what you talk to them about, but I'm definitely seeing in that 125 to 250, things are selling like crazy still, but then it seems a drop off around that 300 mark.
For sure. Yeah, and I think, so Scott's in the primarily Stark County area. I would say that's going to look different in Cleveland, right? Because 300's more beginner up there.
Yeah.
And so I think one, understanding and pulling that market snapshot for each listing appointment when you go into them, because you're right, 200,000 to 300,000 in Jackson Township's very different than $500,000 to $600,000 in Jackson Township, right? And so being able to understand and explain to them that that's not, it's just not as fast as moving. Like there's only 4 houses on the market, but also only 13 sell every 6 months. And being able to explain that to them up front, I think is really, really, really critical. I don't have an answer of why that is outside of there's just less inventory and less buyers and it's less intense.
Well, I think that is the answer. There are less buyers that can afford a $500,000 to $600,000 house in Stark County when you consider whatever the average income is. What I think the average income for the average American is what, 47,000, something like that. It's right around 50, I believe. So when you consider Stark County, there are just less buyers, and that's the reason for the longer time on the market for those homes.
Right.
No magic answer, but an answer. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, we got lots of thank yous. Trying to see if there's any other questions in here. Again, feel free